The grand doors of the throne room creaked open with an ominous groan that seemed far too theatrical for a mere entrance. I was midway through explaining to Lady Mirabelle how a cake made entirely of turnips could be considered a delicacy when the commotion began. All eyes turned as a figure stepped into the dim light, dust motes swirling in the sunbeams like tiny enchanted spirits. There he stood, King Aldric, the original monarch of our little kingdom, looking every bit the part of a man who had been lost for several months in the royal wine cellar or perhaps the neighboring kingdom's less reputable taverns. His crown was perched crookedly atop his head, a little worse for wear, and his royal robes bore more wrinkles than dignity. "Well, well," he said, voice rich with that authoritative timbre one expects from someone who's been told he's king since birth. "I see the fool has been playing dress-up in my absence." I bowed with all the exaggerated flair I could muster. "Your Majesty, or should I say, Your Highness of hilarity. It's a pleasure to have you back from your mysterious disappearance. I was about to send a search party, but then I remembered how often I lose my own shoes." The courtiers held their breath, unsure whether to laugh or faint. Lady Mirabelle, ever the composed advisor, gave me a subtle nod, part warning, part encouragement. Sir Bumbleton shifted nervously, his mismatched armor clinking like a xylophone with every movement. King Aldric's eyes narrowed, but a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You have a way with words, fool, but words do not make a king." "True," I said, "but neither does absence, apparently." Thus began the first act of what would soon be known as the Great Royal Rumble of Wit and Whimsy. The next morning, the throne room was filled with the buzz of whispered speculations and the rustling of silk and velvet. The two rulers sat opposite each other, the jester in his patchwork finery and the king in his slightly rumpled robes. The once proud crown now looking more like a hat someone had sat on. "I propose a council," Lady Mirabelle suggested, stepping forward. "A meeting of minds rather than swords." "Ah, a battle of wits," I said, grinning. "My favorite kind of battle." The council meeting was less a solemn gathering and more a theatrical performance. King Aldric declaimed with the gravitas of a Shakespearean actor, while I replied with the irreverence of a street performer at a royal banquet. Courtiers exchanged nervous glances as the verbal jousting grew increasingly absurd. "If you think the crown suits you," King Aldric said, "perhaps you would like to wear it properly." "I'd rather wear it as a hat," I replied. "It's less stuffy and more fashionable." The tension broke with a collective nervous chuckle, and Lady Mirabelle quickly moved the discussion towards more practical matters. As days passed, the palace became a stage for their ongoing rivalry. At the royal feast, the tension exploded into outright farce. King Aldric attempted to assert his authority by commanding the band to play martial tunes, only for me to interrupt with a lively jig that had the courtiers clapping along in defiance of royal protocol. The highlight of the feast was, without doubt, the pie-throwing incident. It began as a subtle exchange of pastry-based insults, but quickly escalated into a full-scale food fight. By the time the royal guards intervened, both men were covered in blueberry and custard, their dignity as splattered as the banquet hall. Yet, amidst the chaos, something unexpected happened. In a rare, quiet moment among the palace gardens, as the sunset bled orange and pink across the sky, King Aldric and I found ourselves alone. "You are a strange man, Jester," he said, picking a petal from a nearby rose. "Not the fool I expected." "And you are not the tyrant I feared," I replied. "It seems we are both more than our titles." He smiled, a genuine expression that softened the wrinkles of battle lines and courtly stress. Perhaps there is room for both of us. A kingdom ruled by a king and a fool, I mused. Sounds like the beginning of a joke, but one with a happy ending, he said. The power struggle ended not with swords or decrees, but with laughter, mutual respect, and an agreement to share the burdens of leadership. The kingdom, ever a place of contradictions and enchanted lies, had found a new balance. And as the bells of the palace rang out a little off-key, naturally I could not help but think that maybe, just maybe, the truth was best served with a generous helping of folly. But of course, that is a story for another day. I have often wondered what a fool leaves behind when the bells have stopped jingling and the cap is hung up for the last time. Is it merely the echoes of laughter fading into the halls, or something more? As I sit here on the battlements, the dawn spilling gold over the rooftops like a careless painter's stroke, the kingdom stirs beneath me-market vendors shouting their wares, children chasing shadows, the distant toll of the bell calling the faithful to morning prayers. This is the tapestry of life I have been woven into, a thread of truth tangled among lies and illusions. Lady Mirabelle found me here as the sun stretched its fingers through the clouds, her steps quiet but sure. Still lost in thoughts, Your Majesty, she teased, though her eyes held the weight of years shared in counsel. Lost, found, or merely wandering, I replied, patting the rough stone beside me. A fool's legacy is an enigma wrapped in a riddle, tied with a ribbon of laughter. But what is it really? She settled down, her gaze following the bustle below. Legacy is not carved in stone or inked in royal decrees, she said softly. It lives in stories, in the truths that survive the distortions of time. You have changed this kingdom, not by conquest, but by shaking its foundations with honest folly. Her words stirred something within me, a mixture of pride and doubt. I thought of the army of idiots I commanded, their quirks and courage, the battles we fought not just with swords but with wit. I recalled the soothsayers' lies unraveled, the illusions shattered, and the laughter that became our shield and sword. Later, in the quiet of the council chamber, where the fire crackled and shadows danced, our conversation deepened. Power is a curious thing, I mused. It promises control, but often delivers chaos. And yet, Lady Mirabelle countered, it is how one wields that chaos which defines a ruler. You wielded it with jest and honesty, turning conventions on their head. Her voice was a balm to my restless mind. I realized that my reign was never about dominion, but about disruption of lies, pretenses, and stagnant traditions. Scribbler the scribe burst into the study where I had taken refuge, waving a freshly inked scroll. Your stories, my lord, chronicles that will sing your tale for generations. He read passages aloud, his voice weaving my follies and triumphs into legend. The rustle of parchment and his animated tone filled the room, bridging past and future. I listened, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Perhaps this was the true Legucia story told and retold, colored with laughter and truth. Even Captain Noodle, ever the bemused warrior, joined our circle with a grin. Who would have thought that a band of fools could rewrite history? I nodded, knowing that the army of idiots was not just a joke, but a symbol of hope and resilience. Our victory was not in might, but in the courage to be genuine in a world steeped in deception. As twilight fell, I found myself in the town square, surrounded by villagers and old comrades. I told them stories, some true, some twisted for effect, but all laced with the heart of our journey. Laughter bubbled up, mingling with tears, as stars blinked awake above us. In that moment, I understood. A fool's legacy is not a monument of stone or a crown of gold. It is the laughter shared, the truths spoken, and the bonds forged in the crucible of absurdity and honesty. It lives in the stories that outlast us, carried in the hearts of those who dare to question, to laugh, and to tell the truth. And so, as the night deepens and the echoes of my voice fade into the cool air, I wonder not with sadness, but with hope what tales will be told when I am but a whisper in the wind. For in the end, perhaps that is all any of us can ask, to be remembered not for the power we held, but for the truth we dared to speak, and the laughter we left behind. But of that, my friends, more in time, for the story is never truly finished, and a fool's tale is best told with a wink, a nod, and the promise of another jest just around the corner. If there was ever a moment when the kingdom could throw off the heavy cloak of solemnity and drape itself in a glittering toga of absurdity, this was it. The Grand Plaza, once a stage for royal decrees and whispered conspiracies, now thrummed with a new kind of life. Banners of every conceivable color, some plain, some polka-dotted, others striped like zebras that had lost their way, fluttered wildly in the gentle breeze. The townsfolk, liberated from the shackles of pretense, had donned costumes so delightfully eccentric that even the most serious judge might have chuckled involuntarily. Hats with feathers that tickled ears, cloaks sewn from mismatched patches, and shoes that squeaked with every step painted the scene with hues of happiness. At the forefront of this vibrant cavalcade strode the jester himself, his bells jingling a merry tune that seemed to coax smiles from even the surliest faces. His motley shimmered with a rainbow of colors, each patch telling a tale of past follies and triumphs. His sharp eyes gleaming with mischief and a spark of something deeper, perhaps wisdom disguised as jestivade, the crowd with affection. He lifted his cap in a sweeping bow, eliciting cheers and laughter that rippled through the gathered masses like a warm wave. Lady Mirabelle, the royal advisor and master of ceremonies, had outdone herself. Her gown shifted patterns unpredictably, from swirling vines to dancing stars, much to the delight and occasional surprise of those close enough to witness the magic. In one hand, she wielded a fan that occasionally squirted a fine mist of water, catching the afternoon sun in tiny prisms. Her voice rang clear and commanding as she orchestrated the ceremony, ensuring that every participant's absurdity was not only tolerated but celebrated. When a wayward spark of magic caused a puff of harmless smoke to erupt from the ceremonial podium, she merely curtsied with a flourish, turning what could have been a moment of panic into one of delight. The army of idiots, once a ragtag band of bumbling recruits, now marched with a newfound spirit. Sir Bumbleton, their earnest commander, led the charge with his mismatched armor clanking rhythmically. Inevitably, his helmet slipped over one eye just as he attempted a noble gesture, causing him to stumble into a precarious stack of juggling fools. The resulting domino effect sent performers tumbling in a cascade of laughter and playful shouts. Far from being embarrassed, Sir Bumbleton grinned sheepishly, his confusion only endearing him further to the crowd. This was no ordinary army, and this was no ordinary battle. It was a celebration of imperfections, a dance of delightful chaos that bound everyone together. Among the crowd, the great illusionist watched with a mixture of amusement and resignation. His swirling robes shifted colors like a sunset caught in a prism, his eyes twinkling with the recognition that sometimes the greatest magic was the one born from acceptance rather than deception. Having once been an adversary, he now found himself an ally in this curious experiment of harmony. Town crier Jinx added his own brand of mayhem to the festivities, his horn emitting unexpected sounds, a honk, a squeal, a brief burst of musical notes that kept the crowd on their toes and laughter bubbling. His announcements, laced with pranks and playful jabs, reminded everyone that the line between truth and jest was best navigated with a smile. As twilight descended, the plaza transformed under the glow of lanterns shaped like stars, moons, and, fittingly, jesters' caps. Fireworks painted the night sky with bursts of color and shapes that danced like the kingdom's newfound spirit. From a balcony overlooking this sea of celebration, the jester stood quietly, a soft smile playing on his lips. The cacophony of laughter, music, and cheer was a balm to the soul, a reminder that even in a world built on lies and truths, there was magic to be found in embracing one's quirks and contradictions. He thought back to the days when honesty was a dangerous weapon, when every word could spark a war of illusions. Now, honesty had found its place alongside folly, not as a sword, but as a shared joke. The kingdom was no longer a place of secrets and shadows, but a mosaic of laughter and light. A kingdom of fools, he mused aloud, where folly is our fortress and laughter our legacy. And as the night deepened, the people danced on their hearts lighter, their bonds stronger, ready to face whatever absurdities the future might hold. Together, the chamber was thick with the scent of beeswax candles and old parchment, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across the faces gathered in uneasy silence. Mara, the soothsayer, draped in her purple robes that shimmered faintly even in the dim light, stood before them clutching an ancient scroll. Her eyes, clouded with the haze of years but sharp as a hawk's talon, scanned the gathered courtiers before she began in a voice that wavered between solemnity and sly amusement. "Behold," she intoned, "the last prophecy, long hidden in the folds of time, now revealed to our kingdom." The scroll unfurled with a soft crackle, the faded ink tracing cryptic symbols and words that danced tantalizingly between sense and nonsense. The jester, perched awkwardly on the throne that felt far too grand for him, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration beneath the bells of his cap jingling softly with each movement. Sir Pumblechook, ever the nervous advisor, fidgeted beside the throne, his helmet slipping askew as he tugged at his mustache, eyes darting nervously between the soothsayer and his king. Mara cleared her throat and began to recite. "When the fool's laughter fades at twilight's embrace, the shadow of the silent crow shall cross the face. Illusions will waver, truths will collide, and only the jester's echo shall be the guide." The room held its breath. Was it a warning, a riddle, or perhaps a jest at the very idea of prophecy itself? The jester's lips twitched into a half-smile, the gears in his mind already turning. Lady Rythe, the court historian and skeptic, stepped forward from the shadows, her voice sharp and measured. "Prophecies are as fragile as the paper they are written on," she said. "But this one, it feels different, unsettling." The jester nodded slowly, standing and pacing the length of the chamber. "Or perhaps," he mused aloud, "it's a reminder that stories are never finished, that the tale of our kingdom is still being written, one laugh, one tear, one truth at a time." Later, in the quiet sanctuary of the castle's library, Lady Rythe and the jester huddled over tomes and scrolls, their whispered debates echoing softly off the stone walls. The historian argued for logic and evidence. The jester insisted on the magic of possibility. Between them, a fragile alliance formed, bridging the worlds of fact and folly. Outside, the kingdom stretched beneath a sky painted with the first hues of dusk. The jester stepped onto the balcony, the cool evening breeze tugging at his robes. Before the assembled crowd below, he raised his hands, bells chiming softly. "Friends, fools, and future legends," he called out, "this prophecy may be a puzzle or a punchline, but it belongs to us all. The story continues, and I, for one, intend to see how it ends. A murmur of laughter and applause rippled through the crowd, the sound carrying on the wind like a promise. Somewhere between truth and jest, the kingdom found its heart again, beating steady and strange. And so, as stars began to prick the velvet sky, the last prophecy hung in the air, ambiguous, ironic, and alive with the promise of adventures yet to come. For, in a kingdom where only the jester tells the truth, every ending is just another beginning. The bells in his cap jingled once more, a sound that was both a farewell and a call to arms. The fool's echo would carry on, weaving through the tapestry of time, reminding all who listened that sometimes the greatest magic lies in the stories we dare to tell. But what those stories might be, well, that was a secret only the jester knew. And perhaps that was the most truthful prophecy of all. The morning sun spilled over the horizon like a slow, golden laugh, casting long shadows across the palace courtyard where I, the once fool and now outgoing king, stood alone. The bells on my cap tinkled softly in the dawn breeze, a delicate, familiar chime that seemed both absurd and oddly fitting for the moment. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh dew and blooming marigolds mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of old parchment and spilled ink from the night before. Today, I was not the jester who whispered truths in riddles or the king who bumbled his way through court affairs. Today, I was simply a man about to say goodbye to a role he never asked for but somehow grew to love. Behind me, the palace slowly stirred to life, courtiers and soldiers gathering in the grand hall as word spread of my farewell ceremony. I could hear the faint murmur of voices, a mixture of anticipation, curiosity, and the unmistakable undercurrent of unease that always accompanies change. I adjusted my cap, the bells jingled in protest, and glanced down at the scepter resting on the balcony's stone railing. It gleamed with the weight of responsibility and absurdity alike, a symbol that had come to mean far more than just a piece of carved wood adorned with jewels. "Do you think I'm ready?" I muttered to the empty air, knowing full well that no one would answer except the ghosts of failed jokes past. As the hall filled, the air thickened with the scent of polished wood, spilled wine, and the faintest trace of burnt toasts, Sir Bumbleton's doing, no doubt. The motley crowd was a riot of colours and expressions. Some faces beamed with genuine affection, others masked suspicion or relief. Queen Mirabelle stood near the throne, regal and poised, her purple robes flowing like a river of dusk. She caught my eye and offered a nod that was both an invitation and a challenge. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, the floorboards creaking beneath my boots, a reminder that even royalty must tread carefully. Clearing my throat, I began, "Ladies, gentlemen, and those of you who haven't quite decided," I said, voice carrying a practiced ease. "Today marks the moment when this humble fool hangs up his cap and passes the crown. It's been a wild ride, full of more twists than a serpent's knitting pattern and more truths than a tavern full of gossipers can handle." Laughter rippled through the crowd, easing the tension like a warm fire on a cold night. I pressed on, weaving satire with sincerity. "I came into this position quite by accident, much like a cat walking into a fish market and deciding it's now the proprietor. And yet, in this accidental reign, I have learned that truth is not always a sword to be wielded, but sometimes a candle to be lit. Not all lies are wicked, and not all truths are kind." The hall grew quieter, the weight of my words settling like dust on ancient tomes. Queen Mirabelle's gaze softened, and I saw in her eyes a flicker of understanding that transcended politics and power. "So, As I stepped back into the shadows from which I came, I concluded, I leave you not just a kingdom, but a story of fools, laughter, and the strange magic that binds them. May it be told with joy and a pinch of salt. Applause erupted, sincere and heartfelt, mingling with a few tears and knowing smiles. As the crowd began to disperse, I approached Queen Mirabelle, extending the scepter with a flourish that was more theatrical than regal. Our hands met briefly, silent pact, forged in humor and hope. The kingdom is in good hands, I said softly. And the fool in better ones, she replied with a rare smile. Later, alone in my chambers, I found myself surrounded by relics of my journey-tattered costumes, faded letters, and the countless trinkets that had accompanied me from fool to king. Lighting a candle, I sat at the desk and took up my quill, scribbling a final note to whoever might someday find it. The words flowed like a whispered joke, tinged with the melancholy of farewell and the sweetness of memory. To those who come after, may you find laughter in your truth and truth in your laughter. And remember, sometimes the greatest magic lies in the courage to be a fool. I placed the quill down, the candlelight flickering as if in applause, and smiled. The story was ending, but the echo of the fool's laughter would linger on, forever part of the kingdom's soul. And as the bells on my cap jingled softly one last time, I knew that while crowns may be passed and roles may change, the spirit of the fool, the truth-teller, the laughter-maker would never truly leave. With a final bow to the empty room, I stepped out into the dawn, ready to face whatever came next. No longer king, but always the jester at heart. But of course, that's a tale for another time. If you had told me, when last I was merely the royal jester, that I would someday be the most honest man in a kingdom drowning in lies, I would have laughed loudly, and with all the bells on my cap jangling in agreement. But here we are, in a place where truth is as rare as a sober nobleman, and about as welcome. The court of King Reginald the Grandiose is a spectacle worthy of any farce, and I assure you, no one plays the fool quite like I do except, it seems, for the entire court itself. Each nobleman's word is a twisted ribbon of half-truths and outright fabrications, carefully woven to mask ambition, greed, or just plain boredom. The king himself, bless his pompous soul, lies with such flair you'd think he were auditioning for a play rather than ruling a kingdom. Yet, amidst this cacophony of deceit, I alone speak the truth. Not out of nobility or courage, mind you, but because it's simply too exhausting to remember lies. And so, armed with nothing but candor and a motley stitched from the remnants of court jesters past, I stand as the kingdom's singular beacon of honesty. Our story begins on a morning as bright and promising as a prank gone wrong. The great hall was filled to bursting with courtiers dressed in their finest hypocrisy. The scent of overcooked pheasant mingled with the faint aroma of desperation. King Reginald sat upon his throne, which looked far too heavy for him and just as unstable. Jasper, the king boomed, "Tell us a joke worthy of my greatness." I bowed deeply, the bells on my cap tinkling like the warning chimes of a sinking ship. "Your Majesty," I said, "the only joke here is that you believe your own proclamations." A gasp rippled through the hall. The Queen's smile froze, a nobleman choked on his wine, and the royal dog gave me a look that suggested it was reconsidering our friendship. "How dare you?" the king thundered. "You insult your sovereign." "I merely state the truth," I replied, grinning, "which, in this kingdom, is a far more dangerous offense." This exchange, rather predictably, set the tone for the day. For in a land where everyone wears masks of lies, the fool's honesty is a dagger to the heart of comfort. Amidst this turmoil, Madame Vex, took the stage. Draped in shadows and mystery, she unfurled an ominous prophecy that sent a shiver through the marble columns. "Beware," she intoned, her voice dripping like honey laced with venom, "for the war of illusions draws nigh. When the truth is the rarest coin, the kingdom shall tremble beneath the weight of its own deceptions." The court murmured nervously, though no one dared question her words aloud. Prophecies, after all, are like bad weather forecasts, mostly ignored until it rains frogs. Later, as the hall emptied and the day wore thin, I found myself wandering the castle's labyrinthine corridors, a place where secrets are whispered behind tapestries and shadows play tricks on even the most sober mind. It was in one such shadowed alcove that I overheard voices, low, urgent, and dripping with conspiracy. Figures cloaked in deception plotted moves that would ripple through the kingdom like a badly thrown pie. "The king's absence will be our chance," hissed one, and the fool asked another. "He will be useful," came the reply. "Useful, that's a word I'm not accustomed to hearing outside of foolish and unwelcome." As I retreated, my mind raced. The prophecy, the conspiracies, the king's strange behavior, these were threads in a tangled web that I, Jasper the Jester, was about to unravel. And so, dear reader, with a cap full of bells and a heart full of questions, I stand at the threshold of a story where truth is both weapon and curse, and a fool might just be the kingdom's last hope. But beware, in a land where lies are enchantments and honesty a curse, the line between wisdom and folly blurs like the face of a drunken minstrel at dawn. And trust me, you'll want to hold on tight, for this tale is only just beginning. The day ended as it began, with chaos, confusion, and a court that found my honesty more unsettling than any prophecy. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that even the loudest lie cannot drown out the ringing of a fool's truth. And that truth, dear reader, starts with me.